Shalom from Jerusalem. My name is Albert Wexler. I'm the director of Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast. And we are here in the Friends of Zion Museum today with two fantastic people, a fantastic couple. I've known you, Sharon, for a few years now. You've been a great help for Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast. You've been doing amazing work in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You were the head of the international desk, correct? It was like a few years ago. But now you are working as, well, you must tell me better. I'll give you time to really go into the details. But then Gil, your husband, also, you both are career diplomats, and you've been working for tens of years, decades in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And you worked in the Technion with what's public affairs and resource development, and then you've been, doing different tasks in your diplomatic career in North America, in Africa, and we'll go into all of this. But I'm just thankful that you're with me here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Albert.
Thank you.
It's always great to be here, even though we always prefer better circumstances, obviously.
Well, and we are here on a very, very simple reason. We want to give answers for our allies. We want to give you the equipment, the arguments, so that you would be strong to stand with Israel. Because, as I've said, the tide has turned. There's been a time of sympathy when people saw the atrocities and these horrible acts of violence that Hamas, ISIS did. But now we have to cope with the reality. We have to take out Hamas. And you have to be strengthened to stand with us. And we need to be strengthened by you so that Israel could finish the job. So let's start with you, Sharon. You have a very unique role in this time of emergency and tragedy.
Yes, I am part of two situation rooms. One is in the headquarters of the IDF in Tel Aviv, and I'm the liaison person between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the IDF. And another role is in another situation room that deals with all the needs on one hand and the donations and gifts that are given at this time of crisis to Israel and to the affected families and to the different hospitals, to the IDF, and so on and so forth. So indeed, very important roles at this very important hour.
And very intense, I guess, as it takes your hours of attention and work, and it's always something you cannot quite plan.
Absolutely. I'll tell you, Albert, I think that each and every resident of Israel nowadays is going through a national and a personal trauma. And I think everyone is seeking a way of helping out. And this is also part of our way of coping with the atrocities and the horrific events that we have gone through. So everyone in his private life is looking for ways to cope and to deal on a personal and on a national level. And many of us, the way that we find our most effective also on a personal level is to work and to try and be effective and to try and be helpful as much as we can. So I volunteered to be part of these two situation rooms. My ministry asked me to volunteer in one, and I asked them for a special permit to be volunteering in two situation rooms so that I can be as helpful as I can at this time.
It is a very difficult time. I mean, in our family, for these last 2 weeks, there hasn't been business as usual. I mean, it's been very, very tense and a difficult time. What about you, Gil? What do you say?
It's pretty much the same thing. I've been trying to do privately now what I've been doing for many years as an employee of the Israeli diplomatics, as an Israeli diplomat, and also during my years in the Technion, and that is to provide information and mainly context for people who are looking for effective ways to help Israel in this time of need. This crisis is quite unimaginable. It wasn't imaginable more than 2 weeks ago. And for our generation, Sharon and me, who grew up in the shadows of the Yom Kippur War, it is definitely something that we have not experienced in our own adult lives. So you need to find the tools and the ways and the means to enable people to continue to identify with Israel, support it in an effective way, and especially our brothers and sisters around the world who are always opinion leaders when it comes to Israel, and we're looking to them for the assistance and the context, not only to make sure that we continue to garner as much support as we can, and you've mentioned very rightfully so that the sand clock sort of turned already. It actually turned the moment we started reacting to what happened on October 7th in the morning, but not only to extend the length of time we can as far as getting the immediate support we need publicly and internationally, but also to make sure that we continue to a better future and not break down everything that we've built in the last not only 75 years, but particularly in the last 25 years, when Israel grew to be what it is today, as far as tourism, as far as economy, as far as many other assets.
Startup nation.
Yes.
Now, yesterday there were huge demonstrations, pro-Israel demonstration, in contrast to what had happened in the weekend and days before that in London. I think we had thousands, if not
hundreds of thousands.
Yes,
yeah.
standing up for Israel in London. Also in Geneva, there was a demonstration demanding the hostages to be freed. What do you think? What is the next steps? What can our friends watching us do to give that support to Israel?
I think it's very, very important to continue and raise the story. And I think what people expect from people who identify with themselves with Israel, very often these people are what we call in theory or in practice, they're called opinion leaders. They're people who, everybody's an opinion leader on a different field. Everybody has a friend who knows, is great with cars, knows which doctors to use, and everybody who is identified as an Israel supporter in many ways is an opinion leader when it comes to Israel. People turn to him and they look for guidance, they look for context, they look for information. So the first and perhaps the most rudimentary and fundamental thing is make sure that the information you distribute is accurate and correct. In other words, either it came from the foreign ministry, or it came from the IDF spokesperson unit, or it comes through another official channel, or it comes from a major organization. There are many, many people here who are trying to do good in Israel now, and there is a lot of information circulating. My recommendation to people is always focus on the sources you know, and if it looks too good to be true or too bad to be true, or it's not necessarily what you're not sure, just don't circulate the information. It makes a lot of damage when you circulate fake news. A, you circulate fake news. B, you lose your credibility as a source. And the other thing is providing context. Connect people to the personal stories. Connect to the people, to the Israelis. We talk a lot about Israel. We need to talk a lot about the Israelis. People who have been here, people who know Israelis, people who have been with contact with Israelis understand better. People who don't need to get that context. We talk about the people who are hostages in Gaza. They all have personal stories. They all have families. But also people who are in the IDF, who are serving now in the reserve, who have been away from home for over 2 weeks now, and God knows when will they return. People who stand in line for hours to donate blood. All of those stories. People who go into bomb shelters, not only in the south or in the north, but also in Tel Aviv, in Ramat Gan, in Jerusalem in the last week. These people, these stories are the personal stories, and these are the stories that help us connect reality to what's happening, reality to our supporters around the world and to people who are looking for context. We don't want to be just a poster of horrific acts which undoubtedly happened, or just a poster to the very, very strong and harsh reaction that Hamas deserves. We want to give context so we can later on continue and build upon those connections, those relations, make sure that the economy rebounds quickly, that tourism comes back, all those things that make Israel what it is.
Really important. Now, we are facing an enemy that doesn't have honor, doesn't have any need of speaking the truth. They're liars, they are brutal, savage. No international law whatsoever is valid for them. it's a very unfair fight, while Israel tries to be the most moral army in the world. And I mean, we're facing an enemy that shoots rockets from civilian areas, and then the rockets misfire, and then they stage it as if it was Israel that attacked a hospital in Gaza. I mean, you are in the midst of all of that in the situation rooms. Can you give me the picture, give us the picture of how you deal with this?
Albert, you're absolutely right. And this is such an unfair game. And we have to also frame it. We have to frame it. Actually, it's not an Israel-Hamas war. It's either not an Israel-Hezbollah war. This war is a war of people who seek peace, people who seek democratic values against the dark forces of evil, who seeks the export of the Islamic resolution. Look, when you look at Iran and you see how it founded its axis of resistance, this is how it is framed by Iran. They have a lot of proxies, and they conduct their war through their proxies. If it's Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza, in the south of Israel, if it's Hezbollah and Syria up in the northern part of Israel, if it is the pro-Iranian militias in Iraq, and if it's the Houthis in Yemen, and if these are fighters, mercenaries in Pakistan and Afghanistan. All of these factions that are part of the Iranian axis of resistance, that are trying to continue and export the Islamic revolution from Iran, all of these players who attacked also, it was just published in the last week, 3 attacks on American bases in Syria and Iraq. These forces are trying to export this very radical, dark, vicious, shameless Islamic revolution. And as you said, they have no moral base whatsoever. And I have to say, even when you talk to Muslims here in Israel, Muslims make about 20% of the population of Israel today. They are in shock at the atrocities and no moral values at all that has been demonstrated in the last 2-3 weeks. And they said, this is not Islam. This is contrary to Islam. This is a very vicious and, horrific version of political monster that is trying to dominate this region. And when it comes to how to deal with it on the public sphere, okay, I think you're absolutely right that it is not a fair game, because we want to make sure that every clip that we're pushing out or that we're publicizing is correct. We want to make sure that it does not hurt the feelings of people that watch the videos, for example, here in Israel, because everyone is affected, okay? Every person in Israel is affected. Everyone has a family member or a relative or a friend of a friend who was either killed or is abducted or is injured. Everyone is affected in Israel. And thus, we want to make sure that the feelings of those who are affected are not completely hurt, because everyone went through a trauma. So, we have to take all these precautionary measures, and thus, it's not a fair game. We have to apply very simple humanistic filters when we're dealing with the atrocities and the horror that we have suffered, while they can do whatever they want without any value-related filters, not at all. So it's not a fair game. But really, at this time of crisis, we really need our friends. Because it is not a fair game, we need you. We are asking you to take part in this war. This is really our hour of need, and we need you. We need you to speak up the truth, to tell the truth. We cannot ignore it, because when we see the demonstrations in Europe that are pro-Hamas, and Hamas is a terror organization, the most vicious terror organization. It is unbelievable that in Europe you see these huge demonstrations that are in favor of these horrific events. And we need our friends, our amazing friends of the State of Israel. This is your time to help us, and we need you. We need you. This is our time of crisis. It's not only our time of crisis, it's the crisis of the entire democratic world. And you need to be there. Please make sure that you pray for us. Make sure that you write everything about Israel, about the truth, about what's happening here. Make sure that you are participating in all these different medias, if it's Facebook or Twitter or all these social media platforms. Make sure that you speak up with your public representatives, if it's your congressmen or senators, if it's your mayors. This is the time to give gifts and donate to the Israeli economy that is shrinking and is under a terrible burden. We have to support this war, and it's going to be a very long war. We need your help, your financial help, your political help, your public diplomacy help. We need you to speak up with your politicians so that in the Security Council, we get your support, your country's support. We need our friends.
Now, you both have been in diplomatic missions, for years. You know this work from inside and out. And I understand that 5 Israeli embassies have been evacuated or not staffed since the beginning of the war. Egypt, Jordan, Morocco, Bahrain, Turkmenistan, and maybe you know more, maybe there's more that have been evacuated, brought back home. You mentioned also the fact that we have a situation, the big picture involves the whole Western world. To see a demonstration of 100,000 people in London must make people think, what's next? London, United Kingdom, France, Germany. Now, I understand that the foreign ministers and the prime ministers have all sounded their support towards Israel. But we, as you very well said, we are in a bigger picture. It's the free world versus a Islamic radicalism that we see confronting.
Let me first touch on your first question before, and you talked about the pro-Israel demonstrations. I think this is a good remedy for 2 questions that most Israelis have on their, in their minds. The first one is we want to know that we're not alone in this. And people, it's the first question we ask ourselves is, are we alone in this one? Which the answer is obviously not. The second one is we want to know that our allies and our friends are in it for the long term. So to see a pro-Israeli rally or demonstration over 2 weeks after the beginning of this is a very, very encouraging sign on one hand. On the other hand, when you talk about trying to garner support or the local or the let's say the masses or the public opinion or public sphere, so you're very right. It is a struggle, and we are suffering from certain handicaps. But I want to tell you something. As an Israeli, first and foremost, before my professional position and everything, my expectation from my government is to continue and be as reliable and as responsible as it has been. I want to know as an Israeli that when I see Brigadier General Daniel Hagari, the IDF spokesperson on TV, I want to know that he can stand 100% behind what he says. So when he says, we don't know yet and we're checking, I know it's going to take a few hours, it's going to take a toll, but it's a price I am willing to pay as somebody who lived and was born and raised in an Israel or lives in a democratic society where accuracy and the truth still have meaning. The lie is always faster than the truth, but the truth always gets there. And I think that's something that we need to remember always. When it comes to threats internationally, without going into details and information, yes, Israeli diplomats are a target. They've been a target in times of calm, they've been a target in time of peace, and yes, it's a reasonable, I would say, possibility or threat or a real concrete threat that at the end of the day, some of the retaliation against us is going to come from, not necessarily here, but somewhere else in the world. We have, unfortunately, we've had an embassy blown up in Argentina in 1992, and then the AMIA building 2 years later, and that was Hezbollah. We had Israeli diplomats in the past attacked in India, in Tashkent. We just recently had some sort of an incident in China, which is still being looked on. So this is an issue that has always been a part of the Israeli diplomatic service and a part of our way of life. There is a memorial wall in the Israeli Foreign Ministry. It has tens of names on it since the creation of the State of Israel. And what we are doing now, what you see now, is an effort to make sure that, God forbid, no other names are added to that wall. So this is something we live with. And we need to always remember, and our friends always need to remember, that we are resilient and we are strong, but we need the support. We need to know that people are with us. It is very, very important for Israelis to know that the world is not against us. I look at countries like Germany, and I see the support of the public there, which is amazing. You look at the Czech Republic, you look at Austria, obviously the United States.
Austrians even forbade the pro-Hamas demonstrations.
Absolutely, and you understand that people are with us. I think some of these rallies in some of those cities, without going into too much detail, is going to be a wake-up call for many people to realize what's happening. Because if somebody can stand on the street today and say, I'm pro-Hamas, it means that on 9/11, this guy was pro-Al-Qaeda, and when there were bombings in London, he was pro-Al-Qaeda, and when there was a terror attack on a theater in Paris, he was pro-ISIS, and when people were beheaded in the Middle East or burned alive, unfortunately, he was pro-ISIS as well. So there is an axis here. And I think that when you see the support is one thing, but when you see the other side up close under your window, so to speak, or in your neighborhood, I think people are going to start asking themselves the questions. Who exactly am I supporting? On which side of this equation do I want to be? It's going to be a long process. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of hiccups on the way. But I am very, very positive on the outcome. I mean, I think that the outcome is going to be positive because I think people are going to realize soon enough that there's an issue here that they need to face, and it's not just one side versus another, or so-called oppression, or colonialism, or occupation, or apartheid, all those fancy words that are being used. It's a very, very simple equation. And the equation is good versus evil. And I think right now there is no question which side is good and which side is evil. And people will need to make a choice. We need to help them understand. We need to help them realize that the choice they're making is a choice that's going to affect their everyday life eventually, wherever they live. And if there's something that we unfortunately have learned in the past 25 years, that nowhere in the world is immune. And what's happening now in Israel can very well happen somewhere else in 5 to 10 years. So people need to be aware of that. And I think people are starting to wake up to this and are starting to realize it is our job, it is the job of our, and I'm saying job even though it's nobody's, nobody's day-to-day job maybe, but it's our friend's job around the world to make sure that the voice is heard and people understand that they need to make a conscientious and moral choice right now, right here.
I heard from Estonia that the opposition leader mentioned that isn't this the right time to move the embassy, to recognize Jerusalem and move the embassy. And this is something that Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast has been really not necessarily involved with, but we've seen this happen in many places where we've had Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast. The first event that really was a real landmark was during the first Jerusalem Prayer Breakfast. We had Billy Brim from Missouri. She's an elderly lady that has been fighting for Israel for decades. And she just prayed a simple prayer. Lord, please that our newly elected president, Donald J. Trump, would recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital and move the embassy. And there was not many people shouting, hallelujah, amen, or clapping hands, because they all remembered that Clinton promised, that Bush Jr. promised, Obama promised, and Trump had just waived the embassy move. And yet this happened. So maybe it is the right time now to show the support, to recognize Jerusalem. Maybe it is the right time now to come for a solidarity visit. I was so touched by the French parliamentarians that we're here.
As we discussed before, Albert, this is really a time of need for Israel, for the Israeli people, and for the free world. Because as we said, the framing of this conflict is the free world against the evil world. And everyone is part of it. It's the duty of each and every one of us to take part in this war, in this crisis, and to help our camp. And I think that when you look at the Iranian axis of resistance, they call upon all their fighters, if it's in Afghanistan or in Pakistan, or if it's in Yemen or Iraq, or of course Syria, Lebanon, Qatar, Turkey, wherever, they call them to come and free Jerusalem. This is their call. Come and free Jerusalem.
So Jerusalem is the focal point?
Yes. Yes, you see the posters. You see Iranian posters calling all these fighters to come and join the fight of the Palestinians and to free Jerusalem. So I think rightfully you said that the answer to that is actually to come and recognize Jerusalem and to have your embassies right here in Jerusalem. Simple as that. Now, I want to touch what you just discussed with Gil, the rise of anti-Semitism around the world. Again, as you said, there are actually 8 embassies that were evacuated, 8 embassies. There were already 2 terror attacks on our embassies. One was 2 days ago on Cyprus, in Nicosia, and the other one was in Beijing. Okay, the husband of the consul there was stabbed a few times in his face. He had to go through an operation. Thankfully, thank God, now he's stable. But we do envision a lot of terror attacks against Israeli targets, against Jewish targets around the world. Just 2 days ago, the head of a synagogue in Michigan was also stabbed and she died in America. We had a French teacher who also was killed by terrorists about a week ago. So we do see a very high rise in anti-Semitic incidents. And again, we ask our allies, we ask our friends to stand with us, to stand with the Jewish people, to help us guard our synagogues all over the world. You know, nowadays when you speak to heads of communities around the world, they tell the members of their Jewish communities all over the world to look around, to see if there's any suspicious movement around them, to guard their kindergartens in the synagogues. We ask our friends to help us on that. We really need their help.
I got a message yesterday from Sweden that the synagogues and Jewish institutions are under great surveillance because they have to have police patrols and support all the time because of the hostility and this animosity that is growing, especially in the Malmö area in the southern Sweden. And it is so painful to see that democracies that have been standing for freedom and have been receiving those that are persecuted as they thought have become now the hotbeds of terrorism. And
we saw it in Brussels. We saw it in Brussels just a few days ago, the terror attack against the 2 Swedes in Brussels.
They were murdered.
Yeah. So you see this cooperation, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Hamas, Hezbollah, it's all part of the same axis of resistance.
It seems to be that there is like an overall worldwide call. Does it have to do with Al Jazeera? Are they somehow provoking it? Or, I mean, it seems like it's too concerted for me to think that it is happening spontaneously.
I think maybe I can say something because I say it privately. If you are not, or let's say it differently, if you close your eyes for a very long time about the content that's being disseminated around you in your country, and it's many, many countries around the world, through social media, through textbooks, through other means, do not be surprised when you wake up one morning and lo and behold, this is what you have in front of you. You know, Israel has been making a case about the Palestinian school textbooks for what, 30 years maybe? Since the beginning of Oslo, basically. And we've had committees on that, and there was talk about this, and there was discussions, and they changed some of the text, and et cetera, et cetera. But everybody was very, very dismissive about this. Now, surprise, surprise, the people who entered Israel on Saturday morning 2 weeks ago, which textbooks did they study from? Where did they get all these ideas and thoughts and things? So it could be TikTok, it could be a book, it could be a lecture somewhere, it could be many, many things. But people cannot hide from the truth. And the truth is that if you allow those texts to be inserted into the minds of younger people in a very impressionable age, then do not be surprised when this is happening. People talk a lot about what's happening in campuses. In Europe, but mainly in the United States, there's a great concern. This concern is of course justified, has a very, very strong basis. But if you start talking about these problems when kids are in campus already, you're too late. Because the issue started 10, 15 years earlier. And we overlooked this issue. And I think Israel also at one point I'm not saying it gave up on it officially, but in Israelis, you already, as a person here, you're already, okay, it's them with their nonsense again, or I'm not listening to this anymore because there's nothing I can do about it. It became like the weather. It's not the weather, and if you don't have an umbrella, it's going to rain on your head eventually.
Right.
So this is the issue.
Now, since Oslo, the Palestinians had their own media channels and the radio and television, and of course they used it for their worst kind of propaganda. Al Jazeera. Now, I think they have been stopped in Israel because they were documenting the troops' movements in the land. I mean, it seems like it's not a legit journalism. It's more of a spying ring that they are organizing.
It's not only Al Jazeera. Unfortunately, it was others also, other reports. The problem is I think on that case was more our issue than others. There's so many cameras in this country, like in many other places. There is so much information. You mentioned earlier Startup Nation. So yes, we have so many cameras all over the place, and people just, I think, didn't realize we need to stop or neutralize or get them. It used to be very easy up until a few weeks ago to go online and look at highway cameras and other things. So now they
used it.
Everybody uses it, and the media is just there, and if they see troops around somewhere, they will just film it. They're not going to stop. You talk about Al Jazeera, I think it's more the context and the framing of what they do to things. And there's a big question about that. There's a question about Qatar in general, I think, but maybe, we leave that maybe for a discussion a little later on a different platform. And there's all these questions about who exactly is behind those things. Well,
but you think also about the millions of taxpayers' money. I mean, is it 1 billion that European Union used to send to the Palestinian Authority? How much money comes from the United States? I mean, and Israel has been protesting for years about the textbooks, about the money going to the terrorists who are sitting in Israeli jails for murder.
Yes.
So, I mean, was it stopped now? Did you notice? Did European Union stop its?
I don't know if it has stopped completely, but they are definitely going into reviewing it in a most thorough way. The means that they are providing to the Palestinians and what is the end goal or the destination of these funds that are being transferred. Look, I think that, again, touching on the coverage of events and using, free speech and media, again, this is a very unbalanced game, because whereas you see Hamas reports, and a lot of the Muslim world relies on Hamas reports, they are a blunt lie. They use players, they put actors.
Yeah, I saw dolls and
exactly. They stage them in certain scenes, and then they publicize it as if this is the truth. It took Israel a few days to send out, a few hours, sorry, to to show, for example, the attack on the hospital that was actually done by them. It was their launching a rocket, and the rocket fell on the hospital.
500 rockets that have misfired,
Yes, yes, they're firing on themselves. But then they are trying to blame Israel for the terrible damage that was called the dozens of casualties in that hospital.
They said 500.
They said originally 500. Eventually, we probably
And the
were
number
talking-
was there right away.
Immediately.
Like 2 minutes
yeah,
after, we know
2
already
minutes
how
they
many
were
people.
able to count 500 casualties. They estimated the number was around 50, but it was done by them to themselves. And one thing that one has to learn is that Hamas continues to distribute all these libelous and all these false reports, and media outlets should not use or should not rely on this footage, because it is all staged, it is all fake news, it is all one big lie, and we expect our friends and the democratic societies to not just double check, triple check, quadruple check their sources that come from Gaza.
Thank you so much. Well, we are so thankful to you that you joined us on this special report, Answers for Our Allies. And we would encourage you to tune in every day, 1 o'clock Israeli time. And please share these messages. Please feel free to send it, post it, and encourage your friends, because we need your help. Plan a prayer meeting. Israel is heading into the strong storm winds. We are going to be seeing some massive, I hate to say that, casualties, but this is what is happening. We know it is going to come, and so that's why we need you to stand with us. So, shalom from Jerusalem. Tune in tomorrow. See you soon.